Okay. It's quite, yes. So I've got a short video I want to show you as part of the presentation, but I can see actually the images that I sent in. I can see them on the wall behind. So when I show the video, quite a lot of those images are contained in that, so it may explain them a little bit more. I won't go through them at the moment. But what I was thinking about in terms of what people have said so far is thinking about institutional spaces, which really, I guess that's what we're thinking about when we're thinking about the design in terms of how you were talking about small changes we can make to improve those. But I think there's an awful lot to learn from home birth spaces. So when I was doing my doctoral research, there were some really interesting ideas from how women experience home birth spaces and how they curate those for birth, which in my mind that we can use to inform design of institutional spaces, but they're quite often ignored. The value of kind of that knowledge of those spaces is quite often ignored. So I think what I'll do next is show the video, and remember to, hopefully you'll be able to hear it, remember to share sound. So what this is about is it's a very quick overview, about 5 minutes, of the idea of how we use materials and disposable culture of maternity care and design of birth spaces, and kind of just, I guess, leading on to the idea of how do we address the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN in terms of going forward. But there's a lot. The NHS is aiming to be net zero, and especially with how things changed with COVID, that there's a lot of not necessarily unseen, but kind of unthought about disposable things about maternity spaces. So because this is what I'm currently thinking about, I'm just going to show you the video as well. So hopefully you can see that. I can no longer see you, but that's fine. Okay, so I'm hoping that if you can't hear it, just let me know. There is a little bit of me introducing it on campus as well at the start.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sarah Joyce from the University of Leeds, a Russell Group university in the north of England. My poster and video presentation is on the disposable culture of maternity and design. I'm here outside the Roger Stephens building, part of our amazing bridgeless architecture campus designed in the early 1960s. This echoes where you all are at the conference at the Royal College of Surgeons in London. Hopefully you've had a chance to experience the Dennis Lasdon building built at a similar time. This context is important for my poster and video. It represents the post-war desire for a better society, future-focused.
Michel Audon's book, Childbirth in the Age of Plastics, outlines the industrialisation of childbirth, with plastics as tubing and liquid storage, making it easier to augment labour with artificial hormones and epidurals. The partogram was introduced in 1954 as a graphic representation of labour with a linear progression, similar to other modern ideas such as Taylorism and Fordism. Life magazine coined the phrase throwaway living in 1955 to emphasise the convenience of living life in a linear way with disposable items, consumption without consequence. This is the foundation of the spaces we provide for maternity care. Linear concepts inform design. Modernist hospital spaces are not ideal for birth, but in adapting and improving them, we are still adding layers to a foundation that needs to be unpicked more. Women in the past gave birth at home or in maternity homes before hospital birth became the norm in the UK, and they were supported by a midwife in the community and charitable support. We can't go back to the past. This dispersed community and social support could be seen as having the qualities of circular economies that we are seeking now. There is a strong link between modernist architecture thinking and how we perceive health spaces. And this continues with new hospitals such as the new Children's and Maternity Hospital starting on site in Leeds, not far from where I introduced this video. The culture of the new is a challenge for creating a circular economy around childbirth and early parenting. Something new is seen as inherently better than used before. A baby is precious, to be seen to deserve the best as part of the best starting line. Parents are frequently exposed to new commercialised goods. We can compare the Health Building Note 0902 for maternity facilities, the NHS England design guidance. We can compare the linear flow diagrams with photographs of Pithiviers Hospital in the 1980s, when Michel Audin was in charge of the obstetric unit, and see the difference between linear flow and hospital dance classes and pregnant or new mums strolling in the gardens together. There is a visibility between each of the stages defined in the design guidance as linear when we look at the Pithiviers examples. Circular economies exist in microcosm and home birth support groups in the UK. Birth is still a personalised event within the people that go to these groups, but pregnancy and early parenting is a shared experience and items are borrowed. Sustainable motherhood is a part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Circular economy is a part of the European Union's Circular Economy Action Plan, and the UK National Health Service is aiming to be carbon net zero. A systematic approach is recommended to tackling climate change. So it is important for us to analyse the wider context of birth, especially social and economic factors, as well as actual materials and devices used. There is a disposable culture of birth spaces, driven in part by the societal pressure for parents to have newly made baby goods as the best for an unborn child. Status and convenience motivate some of these actions, such as being able to afford the pre-packed labour bag depicted on the poster. However, as a baby grows, many items quickly become redundant, and we should redefine what is the best we can give a child at the beginning of life, to include extending the life cycle of materials. Single-use items and single-patient items are another major issue. This is where linear thinking separates some core design principles from what we expected of birth spaces in the past. A fundamental change is that birth spaces are health spaces and not the social space of the woman who is giving birth. They are also repeatedly used by different users. This results in our current reliance, certainly in the UK, on so many single-use or single-patient items for childbirth, and this is centred around infection control.
I hope sound quality was okay, because for me it was terrible, but because it's I can hear myself repeated, but that's fine.
It wasn't as good as you are now, but it was okay. We could hear it.
Good. So so I was thinking, so that was some ideas around kind of the issues of, I suppose it's a very complex issue in terms of infection control is quite a barrier to, when you're thinking about the small changes you're interested in exploring. It's infection control, I found as a service user representative, is a massive barrier to a lot of things that might be interesting, like your fabric concealment. It's fine for you to kind of bring that in and take it with you, but it's very hard to kind of make that available for lots of people. So some of the things that kind of, from what people have said so far, I thought it was when Jane was talking, that idea of concealment is another thing I'm really thinking about at the moment, because you were talking about kind of concealing yourself, which is so my PhD was a lot about women trying to find a space where they can conceal themselves, but a lot of birth environment research talks about concealing equipment, but the woman is still, the woman giving birth is still exposed, so it's just you're hiding the equipment but not the woman. And so I just wanted to also highlight a really interesting book for me, which is X-Ray Architecture by Beatrice Colombino, because that's about how it's made me think about how when to not think about birth spaces just as the space where a woman gives birth, but actually how often she's exposed to hospital spaces. So in terms of surveillance, in terms of people having scans, so actually you're introduced to this kind of institutional space in lots of ways during pregnancy as well. And actually the idea that kind of we're always kind of making the baby visible and making this woman kind of very exposed in a way, in terms of how well, birth rooms are designed. So in terms of like modernist ideas of design and health spaces is very much around kind of making the patient observable, which is kind of contradictory to really to the kind of things that make birth environments work well for labour. And the other thing to think about in terms of, I don't know if you do look at the HBO 902, which is the maternity facilities design guidance, there's a lot around making birth rooms into tools. So there's a lot around the birth environment being a tool that facilitates physiological birth, which has been a real focus in birth environment design, about providing equipment that makes upright positions of physiological birth easier. But one of the things I found in my research is that actually that equipment is still quite unfamiliar to women, so they don't necessarily know how to use it. So it's quite a lot of equipment-based thinking, I guess. So I think probably it's kind of one of the things that I think is an important thing to investigate is the idea of birth spaces that are a series of spaces. So if there's a birth room with an ensuite, that actually that ability to kind of to go freely between spaces and choose that autonomy to choose how much contact you have with the other people around you. I think other people have talked about relationships in the room, but having that ability to use spaces in the room to hide yourself or reveal yourself is really important. And when we think about just a single room on a labour ward, it quite often doesn't give people that ability to choose whether they're seen or not. So that was another important thing. Yeah, and I think also there's around a little bit what, when Elsie was talking, I was thinking about, I was involved in a Canadian project which kind of exposed me to some birth centres which are created around Indigenous practices, particularly in Canada and Australia, and about actually how we kind of need to get away from this idea that evidence-based healthcare design is not something that's neutral. It's kind of modern hospitals and designing things on like scientific principles is actually quite loaded with very kind of specific culture, and that actually I think there's a lot to be learned from home birth and from kind of thinking about cultural practices that unfortunately have kind of been marginalized by it's almost like I was thinking a steamroller of kind of these beautiful new hospitals, like the new children's and maternity hospital that's going to be built in Leeds is digital by design. It's very technologically based, but it's missing that understanding of kind of people's Indigenous practices and kind of what kind of women want. But I'll stop there. So I'll start kind of going on to other themes. But yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. That was so wide-ranging and fascinating.